Hello everyone and welcome back to 20-0 Tactics with me, James The Loremaster Lammin. And today we're going to be talking about the art of overrunning. So I suppose the best way to start this is to just have a brief chat about, well, what is overrunning? Well, on a turn in which a unit charges and completely wipes out the thing, the unit, the monster, whatever it is, the model that they're fighting, at the end of that they may make a reform or they may make an overrun move. Now, an overrun move is basically a pursuit move, but where you're not pursuing, you're just carrying on the momentum of the charge. So you'd roll 2d6 and you move forward directly straight. If that would bring you into contact with another enemy, then you make one wheel to maximise models in combat, as it's after that point it's basically just treated as a new charge. So you will make that wheel and do all the same things as if it was a charge phase charge. So what we're going to start with today is, well, when should you overrun? And I'm going to ask my great cameraman Max to pan down to, as you'd come to expect, one lovely board tile covered with different models to talk about when you should overrun. Now, this is without a doubt one of the more tricky questions I'll have to answer on an episode of 20-0 Tactics. There isn't really a hard and fast, always do this or never do that type answer that I can give you to overrunning. But what I can give you is a list of general principles to help you work out whether overrunning is the correct choice. So we're going to use the table now to demonstrate the first ones. So the first one is you should overrun if you have a chance of making new combat. So if we take our Wild Riders here, they charge in, they maximise. I know it was a bit of a SE charge, but they would have maximised. They destroy the mounted yeoman. And then obviously they've got a pretty good chance of making that new combat. Let's have a little look. Oh, they wouldn't need to roll very much at all. Cheeky 6 on 3 dice, so that's definite for me. That's a should overrun. And obviously, as we just said, then we'd make my wheel to maximise the number of models in the fight. Now, the reasons that you might want to do that include sort of, obviously, going into enemies that you think you've got a really good chance of beating up, like these Knights of the Realm getting charged by a unit of Wild Riders. I'd fancy the Wild Riders there. It might be to prevent an enemy getting a bonus like Devastating Charge or Lances, another fantastic illustration with those Knights of the Realm. It might be simply that you want to stop them being shot at. If there was a trebuchet over here, we'll discuss more on that in a little while. It could be that you feel there's an enemy character in the front row that you want to slaughter. The possibilities are endless, but that's a should overrun time. Now, we're going to build up some other overrun instances as well. So the next one we're going to look at is getting out of arc of sight. So you can see here, if I've charged these very heavy mounted yeomen with the Wild Riders. Now if these guys had the choice to overrun or reform, now I know that they're frenzied and you're going to say, well, they don't get the choice, but let's pretend they weren't frenzied. They've lost their frenzy earlier in the battle and they wipe out the yeoman now. We can see quite clearly here that the arc of sight on the Knights is not very favourable for us. We're going to get charged by them. So this is one of those times where going for the overrun's really important. Even a small overrun there, 5 or 6 inches, takes us out of arc of sight. That keeps us nice and safe. Now this one is particularly pertinent for Knight armies, which is why I've chosen cavalry today. You imagine a unit like these Knights of the Realm, exactly the same trick. If they'd charged into this eagle and had my Wild Riders here, they definitely want to be looking at an overrun to get to about there, I reckon, to be safe from arcs. Should we see if my arc judgment's good? Yes, pretty good. So, you know, they're going to want to do that to make sure that they don't get countercharged in the flank. That would be awful for them by these Wild Riders. So getting out of arc of sight, that's another time we probably want to overrun. Now, the next one we're going to look at is, does overrunning meaningfully affect ranges? So we're going to take a look at our first setup again. And we can see over here that our eagle is a long way away from our general here, who's giving out inspiring presence. So if we go for this charge, boop. And we can say, well, my eagle's still out of range. I really want to get my eagle in inspiring presence. Now, I know there's probably not a lot of times you want to say that, but the eagle might have to test to march. We don't know what's beyond this board tile. Obviously we're doing very isolated things to show these tactics off. It might be that there's a trebuchet here as well. It's a great example with a trebuchet again. So assume we've now got a trebuchet here. So do we overrun? Well, we can still get trebucheted, We're more than 12 inches away. So if we go for this overrun, make our wheel in, boop, boop, suddenly we're in combat, we can't get there. Even if we fail to make the combat and end up here, not so great, I know, but our eagle might slip into Inspiring Presence range. We're inside the 12 on that trebuchet. So it meaningfully affected ranges in this scenario. We could even take these knights out of the equation completely and just say, should I have overrun in that previous scenario? Well, yes, because it gives me a better chance to get my Inspiring Presence on this eagle, and it gives me the best chance to get out of the minimum range, or get inside rather, the minimum range of this trebuchet, which gives me the best chance of not getting my Wild Riders killed and keeping my Inspiring Presence in play. So it's about ranges. Now, the next one we're going to talk about is pinning an enemy in place. So we might want to make an overrun move to pin an enemy in place. So for example here, we've got some great swords now. Let's get exciting with our great swords. We're going to add our chariot actually. And we're going to say, so we can see we've got this nice, in fact I don't really need the great swords, what I need is these guys, our yeomen here. So, for example, our eagle might decide that he wants to charge here, boom, don't need these anymore, and he kills these guys here, and he's got a choice whether he overruns or whether he stays put. Well actually, if I don't pin this Celestial Hurricanum, it's going to get out of my arc of sight, or it's going to get perhaps in a position with these. Perhaps I might find myself simply pivoting it, moving it forward 8 out of arc of sight. Don't want that, it's really useful. So I'll overrun and I'll pin it with the eagle. Now it's pinned. Now the great swords have got to kind of work out what they want to do about it, and then, you know, next turn these guys might come trooping back in for a big charge to finish it off for me, because it's really important. It might mean that these guys pivot to try and help the eagle with whatever they want to do, but we've pinned that. We've done that to stop it moving, and that's the crucial element, is to stop this thing getting where it wants to be. And this can be even better if, for example, it's a little bit further away and it's now out of the +1 to hit bubble, about there. Oh, slightly more, yep. And we go, oh, actually, you know, I will charge those archers, and I'll pop them, and I'll come through, and I will overrun, and I'll tie that up, so that now the great swords have got to move towards that to get their +1 to hit, and these Wild Riders are here being very scary. So do they try and declare a charge on them, or what do they do? You've pinned it. Keep repeating myself, I know, I'm good at that. So, wow, now, you might want to overrun as well if it brings a unit off the table. So in this scenario, for example, we have our archers. If I can pick the tray up, we have our archers here and our great swords here. So we go in with our unit and we say, you know what, we've gone in and we really don't want to get countercharged by that, so we're going to go for an overrun. Now we're just assuming they're not frenzied. I know we don't have a choice, but we're going to pretend we do for a moment. We're going to assume they've lost their frenzy. We're going to go for the overrun off the table. Now this prevents them being countercharged that turn. It also prevents them having spells cast on them or being shot. Now all of these things are really useful in the final third of a game. I want you to think about turn 5. This is probably the optimised turn for this tactic, because you've still got your turn 6 to bring them back on, and you might even have time to bring them back on and get your own redirector, C20 tactics redirectors in place to save the Wild Riders. Now you don't want to be doing this if you don't have any more turns to play yourself, so if you're not going to get another turn, because anything off the table at the end of the game is dead, so we don't want it to be dead, but we can protect it by pushing it off the table. And that's all the times I want to talk about when I think are the good times to overrun. So there are bad times to overrun, and the bad times to overrun are when it's a big gamble. If you can make a solid reform that's going to mean you take a charge in a favourable fashion, rather than declaring a really big overrun that you have to make to get in, well, sometimes it's better just to say, I'm going to make that solid reform and I'm not going to gamble, because the worst thing you can do is go for a big overrun like a 9 or a 10 or an 11, not get it, and then get caught in the flank by something really wicked coming back at you. And that was all because you didn't show patience and you didn't just reform. Fantastic. Now, it's also worth pointing out that a lot of these tactics we just discussed work with pursuing as well. The only difference being that in a pursuit scenario, your opponent might pass the leadership test, might roll double 1, even if they've been smashed really badly. Doing the max if you've watched a recent Take the Crown report. So it's not as guaranteed is probably the way I want to sort of point that out. So I'm going to finish this section off now before we take a break and reset the table to show you the next part of this video by giving you one of my classic shorthand recaps of the things we've just discussed, and it's the principles of when you should overrun. And it goes like this: you should overrun if you can get a new combat that you think's favourable. You should overrun to escape arc of sight. You should overrun to affect ranges. You should overrun to pin enemy units in place. And you should overrun to escape the tabletop as long as it's not turn 6. When shouldn't you do it? When it's a big gamble. So don't gamble. That's how I'm going to finish this. Don't gamble. So we're going to reset the table now, and I'm going to bring you the next section of this video, which is all about maximising your overrunning. Right, so we're now going to take a look at maximising your overrunning. Now, this is the real meat of today's tactical video. We're going to follow the principles that we just set out in the first part of the video to give you consistent overrun outcomes. And there is this one additional way, if you like, to really maximise overrunning in your games, and that is all about overrunning into combats that haven't been fought yet this turn. Now, we're going to head down to the tabletop so I can show you guys what I mean by this. So you can see we've got the Bretonnians and the Empire here. It's been an arduous campaign. Our Grail Knights are down to just 6 models. They're Grail Knights now. And we've got some Yeomen here, and these are great swords taking a beating as well. And the key component here is all about the order in which you fight combats. So we're going to imagine our Yeomen are brave and they charge in, and we're going to imagine our Grail Knights now charge in. So component number 1, what order do we fight the combats in? Well, the answer is we have to fight them in an order that ensures that the overrunning unit can get into a combat that's going to then be fought again. This allows the overrunning unit to fight twice in one turn. It only works if the unit that they're overrunning into is already engaged and hasn't fought. So in this case, it's obvious we are going to fight this combat first, and we're going to kill the Celestial Hurricanum. I'll try not to put it in the camera line. And then we're going to go for our overrun and our wheel in. Now, fortunately, these great swords are quite heavily depleted, and I think we've got a good chance of winning this combat with the Grail Knights now. Now, there's a couple of ways that you're using this. You're either using it to get your best unit, in this case the Grail Knights, to basically kill 2 units in one turn. They've killed the Celestial Hurricanum, and now they've got a really good chance of killing the vast majority of those sort of 16 or 17 greatswords and a couple of characters. And obviously the greatswords being stubborn would be the way you want to be putting your dice. Now, the Yeomen are basically sacrificial in that scenario. They're going to die because it was about getting our best unit to do double the damage. Now, the other way of utilising this, if you like, is to fight it with a combat you feel you've actually got a chance of winning anyway. So we've got a Bretonnian Lord here and another small unit of Grail Knights. There's 4 left. They've reformed into this nice little stick, and instead they've charged. Now, our Bretonnian Lord, the remaining Grail Knights, we feel pretty good about that. That's not a bad combat. But imagine now we go with the charge here, we wipe out my beautiful Hurricanum, and then we fought this combat first. Very important, so that we could overrun here. Now what we've done this time is bolstered our chances of winning a combat that we thought we might win anyway. We've effectively doubled our chances. We've added another 6 Grail Knights, so it's going to almost double the powerhouse in there. Now, whichever way you're looking to do this, whether it's looking to pin it with a chaff block like we did the first time round, or whether it's looking to bolster a stronger combat, it's worth pointing out that units with fast cavalry or units that fly can be really, really good in this role, okay? Because they aren't as easily blocked off. So if we imagine now, we'd like to do our nice overrun shenanigan, but the Empire player puts these guys here. Now if we had something that flies, that's going to be a much bigger help. So if we restack the deck back to our wood elves, to give you an example of what I mean here. Ooh. Everyone's very scared when I pick up the Grey Knights. No one's more scared than me. Now these would be blocked off if they were the ordinary knight unit we saw a moment ago, but now the eagle can still charge over the top using his fly. He can pin, bosh, you know the drill, fight this combat first, overrun into that. Now, the only thing you do need to remember is that the combat you're going for first, you really do need to ensure you have a high probability of actually killing the first unit. So this isn't always going to work if you've got two humongous blocks and you're thinking, well, I can bust through. You probably won't, unless your unit's really ace, like Witch Elves, or something that really dishes out bucket loads of attacks, like a big block of Warriors of Chaos with poison or something like that. But you see in the scenarios I've used to illustrate it, it's about picking up a very killable target for something like Wild Riders, not a problem, and then using that to bounce in to a much harder target. Now you can do this through pursuit moves as a touch point. If this was another block of Empire guys here and we smashed them up and they failed their leadership and ran, we could then pursue, and the pursue as they flee, imagine this did survive somehow, it would turn and flee through its own unit, and the pursue move would bring us into contact as well. But obviously there's always that chance that they throw a double one if you're trying to do it through pursuit. Now I'm sure you'll all agree that this is actually quite easy stuff when we break it down like this, but don't be fooled. These options come up a lot in games. This will happen a lot. Watch battle reports on the channel. Think about when you're playing your friends at home or at your gaming clubs. You'll see these things, they come up quite often and you think, oh, if I just fought them in this order, I can get a double bump with my best unit, or I can double my chances of winning a combat where it was, you know, a fair fight. Now I've made it an unfair fight. Now these tactics, very basic as they are, they will definitely up your win rate. So don't miss the opportunity to maximise your overrun by going into combats that you've yet to fight this turn. So that concludes that meaty part of tactical genius. I'm sure you're all at home thinking what a genius I am and not thinking that's pretty simple stuff today, James. It is pretty simple stuff today. And we're going to finish up today's video by having a look at having to overrun. So this is something we talked about in a redirector video before, and with frenzied units, predatory fighter units. So I'm going to cover that now, and I'm going to cover, well, what you can do as the owner of the models that has to overrun to help yourself out. So the final section of today's video is all about how we minimise the worst effects of overrunning. That is, units that have to overrun. So units with frenzy or predatory fighter, and there's a couple of other things that can cause this to happen as well. They have to overrun and they have to pursue, for that matter, when units break or flee from combat too. Now, this is a big issue. In fact, I did a video all about redirecting on how you can completely use that to smash up your opponent's most dangerous units. And what we're going to do in the final section of today's video is talk about mitigating the worst effects of having to overrun, so that you're always getting the most, or, you know, the best outcomes from overrunning. And that's going to round up our art of the overrun. So if we come back down to the tabletop, good news, ladies and gentlemen, our Wild Riders haven't lost the combat. They are still frenzied. This is early doors in the game. Now you can see they had a really nice, beautiful charge into the flank of these Grey Knights here. But my canny opponent has placed this unit of mounted yeomen in front of me. See 20-0 tactics redirecting for more details. Now when I charge these mounted yeomen, I'll close the door like this. At the moment I'm quite safe from being counter-charged. But when I kill them and invariably overrun, I'm in arc of sight. Oh dear, I'm frenzied, I can't flee, this is a disaster. So what do? Well, we take our good friend the eagle here, the bird, and he comes along and he plops himself here. So you can see he's kept himself out of that arc marker, he's got himself 1 inch behind the yeoman, and then when I overrun, I'm actually going to go over the top. I kill this unit and overrun. I have to stop 1 inch away from my eagle. And what that's done is the first part of this tactics section, which is it stopped my good quality Wild Rider unit getting hit with a really unpleasant counter charge. That would have been a flank charge as well. So that is not good. We didn't want that to happen, and thankfully it hasn't. Now the other thing that this can do, even if this unit isn't here, let's imagine they're off the table for a minute, and we have the same scenario, and I've got my Wild Riders rushing this flank. This is the bald edge, and my canny opponent does this because they want me to rush off the table Mr. Eagle, he can fly himself here. And when I go pop and bang, as we saw, I go boop instead. And I bounce off my eagle. And that's really important, because what we've done there is we've stopped them getting miles out of position. We've stopped them getting off the table, losing the inspiring presence of the wizard, or not having a spellcaster to dispel things in this example. So what we did was we stopped them getting pushed into a really unuseful position. And sometimes when you've got frenzied or predatory fighter units, that can be a real issue as well. It doesn't always have to result in you losing the unit. It can be just as bad to be denied access to the important elements of the unit for a turn or two. So this stops them getting pulled massively out of position. Okay, and this gets more exciting and more important when you have blocks. And so what I'm going to do with the final part of this demonstration is I'm going to use some Empire again. And I'm going to illustrate this with a blocks scenario. So it needs to give me 30 seconds, guys, to set up. Bear with me. I know you love to bear with me on these things. Now, be really careful about this one. So, the back rank's going to have to come off because I need just a little more space to illustrate the example, basically, guys. So, a little bit harder to just set this one up and be perfect with it. So you might have to bear me a second. So, got my little detachment of archers here. And we've got, unfortunately, this guy here. He took the sword from the magic items section that makes him frenzied. Max is going to tell me the name of that sword now because I've forgotten it. Berserker sword, that is correct. He's got that, and so now he is frenzied. Shocking. They go in, they're going to have to overrun. Now, this is not good for us because, as we can see, there is a very big unit of knights there. And if we overrun, and we do stay on the table, oh dear, if we had them a little more angled. Oh dear, we've not overrun very far. This happens with units a lot. Witch Elf players be watching, and all of a sudden, it's quite obvious what's going to happen now. It's a flank charge. So the knights come in on a really punchy flank charge. Now if we go back a moment to our scenario that we had, which was this one, and we just simply move these guys here, still an inch away all ways round. When we kill these guys, and we have to overrun because he took the Berserker sword, we bump 1 inch away and all of a sudden look what's happened. They're in the front. Now, I quite like my Empire. I'd be much happier, much more grateful to receive a charge on something like Greatswords, even though they're stubborn. Imagine if this unit wasn't stubborn, if it was those Witch Elves that I haven't got to hand today. But suddenly they have to charge me in the front. So this is a huge difference. It's effectively has allowed me to almost reform the unit. It's, you know, instead of having to overrun them, if you like. So it's huge. It's prevented a crucial flank charge from my opponent, and I don't think those Grey Knights are going to fancy it as much. Certainly not when you find out that the character there was named by the Witch Hunter at the start of the game. I mean, he's going to get killing blown on the stand and shoot. So that's it. That's it. That's how we can do our best to mitigate those poor overruns. And again, fast cavalry, flying chaff, they are the best units to do this. And then sort of secondary to that are units with skirmish, things like skink skirmishers, very good for you Lizardman players that are using predatory fighter and having that predatory fighter based issue. So that's it. To summarise, getting the most out of your overruns can quickly and effectively up your game. It's not difficult tactics, guys, this one. Not my plumbed my brain for my depths of great knowledge today. Really just simple tactics, really, really well. Remember shorthand from earlier on. Do overruns for a new combat. Do overruns to escape arc of sight. Do overrun to affect your ranges. Do overrun to pin enemies. Do overrun to escape the tabletop on turn 5 or less. Don't gamble. That's it. That's the end of today's 20-0 tactics video. So make sure you do all of the usual things. Pop over onto our social media channels and let us know what you think. Let us know how this has affected your games, or if you've seen any opportunities in there that you think, yeah, That's fantastic stuff. Make sure you head back to the Night of the Realm mustering ground as well, where you can check out all of our other exclusive content, including a plethora of other 20 Nil Tactics videos. And I'll see you next time on this section.
Remember to tag your friends and like, subscribe and share. Then head over to triplecrownwargaming.com and become a Knight of the Realm today.
What are you doing, mate?
You alright? Do it for Warhammer!